Hello and welcome to ONTV's Fantasy Football League. I am the commish Joe Johnson and also the owner of Team Hollywood Blockbusters, who's not doing so well right now. My guest is walking in right now. Kevin, come join me. Have a seat. Put the mic on. We are going to be looking back at Week 8 in the fantasy football world. Overall, a low-scoring week if you look at the scores that are on the screen. We're going to go through game by game and take a look at the results. Let's go to the first game between my Hollywood Blockbusters and Valhalla the Thrashers, two of the worst teams in the ONTV Fantasy Football League. Basically, in this particular game, it was a battle of the quarterbacks. I had Matt Ryan, who was facing Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers, and both of them put up some decent numbers, but in the end, it was Aaron Rodgers who outplayed Matt Ryan of the Falcons. Let's start on my side of the ball. Let's look at Matt Ryan's bottom line here. Against the Packers, I expected a nice showing of points against the Packers. The Packers' defense isn't what it's cracked up to be. Ryan threw for 288 yards, 3 touchdowns to produce 32 points. You think that would be enough to deliver a win, but unfortunately, in the same game, Aaron Rodgers put up 246 yards and 4 touchdowns to produce 44 points to give Valhalla the edge. My dud of the game, I got quite a few double-digit points. Doug Baldwin, who really came through for me last season, only put up 5 points, and he's not giving me the numbers that he put up last season.
Right.
And tight end Gary Barnidge, who I expected to have a big game against the Jets, one of the worst teams in the NFL, only put up 4 points. That was a killer. My regular defense was on a bye, so I went to the waiver wire. I picked up the Browns facing a terrible Jets defense, and Browns couldn't even stop the Jets and only produced 2 points.
Oh, goodness.
Over on the other side, like I said, Rodgers, 44 points. He connected with Jordy Nelson for 15 points. And he picked up Bilal Powell off the waiver wire and got 13 points, which was the difference in the game. If we look at the bench, my bench kind of makes me laugh. You can see that I was devastated by bye weeks this week.
Oh, yeah.
The majority of my team was on a bye, and those that weren't on a bye are hurt. So my bench produced 0 points.
Well, I'm looking at your buys, and I see that you got 3 guys on your bench, all from the New York Giants.
Yeah, I kind of, on draft day, I banked heavily on the New York Giants. I really thought this was going to be their year, but Eli Manning has not been living up to expectations. He's had multiple games with 0 touchdowns, and he has a core of wide receivers that I think are among the most talented in the league, and he's not finding them. He's not connecting with them.
Well, the thing with that too, but the thing with the bye week, because I had a similar situation where I had 3 players drafted from one team, the Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, and Kelvin Benjamin.
Yeah.
And they all have a bye the same week. And you have to scramble to get players to fill those slots.
Sure.
And the players usually that are left on the waiver wire are not
the cream of the crop.
Yeah. Right, they're not high-producing players. So you end up with just trying to grab whatever you can just to fill in and try to get some point. So that's a lesson that I learned from my 15-year-old son, who said, "Oh, I never draft guys from more than one guy from the same team." I'm like, really?
See, the opposite logic to that is, okay, so you have one really rough week during their bye week, but then you have a full complement of players the rest of the season.
Right.
So,
and the thought is that because they are on the same team, they know each other, they know how to get the ball to each other, that they're going to produce more as a unit. But my Carolina draftees have been in the same situation as your Giant. They haven't lived up to that expectation.
And so when you bank heavily on one team, if they don't produce, you're hurting.
Right.
And the frustrating thing about this particular week is that I put up 101 points, which would have beaten almost every team in our league except Valhalla, the Thrashers, and Ian Witherspoon's team. So it's frustrating when you produce and still get a loss. Let's take a look at the game between the newly named Reawakening team versus Joe Velez's undeflated team. Reawakening sucked the air out of the undeflated. despite the fact that Undeflated has been getting incredible performance from Tom Brady. He's just came up with a loss. Derek Carr, probably the quarterback of the week for the Oakland Raiders, 47 points in a game that went to overtime, which helped pad his stats. 513 yards passing, 4 touchdowns to produce 47 points.
Well, he got his final touchdown in the overtime period when he threw the ball to the receiver, and the defense didn't tackle the receiver very well at all.
Yeah,
and he sprinted into the end zone, and that ended the game. So Derek Carr, he's an up-and-coming quarterback. He's really putting the Raiders on his shoulders and driving them where they need to go.
Yeah, and Sammy picked up Niall Davis with the Packers, who just got released again this week. So we got a big fat goose egg from Niall Davis. I think Niall Davis might be done in the NFL unless there's some team out there who's desperate. Wow. Who else? Spencer Ware got hurt. They're talking about maybe who's the name they were throwing out for Kansas City?
Jamal Charles.
Charles is on IR. Spencer Ware, I think, might be going under concussion protocol, so they might be bringing a third stringer in to start with them. So on the other side, like I said, he got great numbers from Brady, but wow, a lot of single digits there. And 1 point from Greg Olsen, who's been having a spectacular season for a tight end. Only got 1 point there. 2 points from the Patriots defense against Buffalo. So yeah, a lot of single digits there. If we look at his bench, a lot of points on the bench. Matt Stafford did not outscore Brady. Crowder, who has been having a nice season for the Redskins, he scored 16 points on the bench. So that might have made a difference there, But so it's Sammy comes away with the win, improves his record to 3-5. Undeflated is still at 500 at 4-4. Let's go. Oh, this was the game of the week here. King Kaloje Ant versus Team Witherspoon. Two of the top teams in our league went head to head. Witherspoon came away with the win, but Ant is still has a respectable record at 6-2. Not a ton of, no single performance on Witherspoon's side stands out, but he just got a lot of consistency from his team.
A lot of his players, I'm looking here, a lot of his players with the exception of 2 are all in double digits.
Exactly.
And that's where you want to be, is where you want your players to each be producing at least 10 points per, because that keeps your point total high.
Yeah.
Which is what I struggle with my team, I'm sure.
Nice performance from Drew Brees against Seattle. Theo Riddick had a nice game in that loss against Houston. Rob Gronkowski, he has been on fire since Brady came back off the 4-game suspension.
The Gronk.
Over on the other side, Ant got 22 points from Luck. A lot of single-digit performances there, though, that killed him. James White,
low single-digit performances.
2 points. T.Y. Hilton, who has been playing really well, 2 points in that game, which is really surprising.
And see, that's funny because you look at Luck. Luck's got 22, so he had really good stats.
Yeah.
But T.Y. Hilton, only got 2 points. And you're like, well, how does that happen? That's his main weapon is T.Y. Hilton. But I think that shows that the opposing defenses were probably scheming against T.Y. Hilton, forcing Luck to look to other targets which weren't in his draft pool.
Well, one of those targets was Dante Moncrief, who has been hurt the past couple of weeks. This past weekend was his first game back, and he scored a touchdown. So Luck had more targets to throw to than he has been traditionally. On the bench, Jonathan Stewart for the Panthers, 20 points on the bench. Jeremy Hill, 13. Man, Witherspoon's got some depth on his roster.
He does.
Even Gillislee has been performing over in Buffalo. Ant's been hurt by byes as well. His Pittsburgh players, Miami, and his Ravens are all on bye. 31 points from Cousins, though, on the bench. He outscored Andrew Luck. That could have been the difference in the game there, too. So, it's always painful when you lose a close one and you leave points on the bench.
Right.
All right, let's look at your game.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
What a squeaker.
To win with 80 points breaks my heart, but hey, this is fantasy football, and you won by 1 point.
Right. It was close because I was checking my scores regularly, and the ESPN app projects what your scores are going to be and projects your opponent's scores. And I think John and I were going back and forth on the projections about who was going to end up winning. And I was like, I need players to produce. But if you look at mine, you see where almost all my players, with the exception of like 2 or 3, are all single digits and not really high.
And a couple of zeros. You got a 0 from McKinnon, a 0 from Bills D. You were lucky to pull off this win.
The Bills let me down because they were playing the Patriots, and they gave up, I think, 41 points to New England, and it just gave me a big goose egg. And then if you look down at my bench, you see that Denver, I think, put up 22 points in their defense.
How do you bench the Broncos defense? I know they're playing San Diego, but Denver's been playing so well.
I had benched them during their bye week, and then I didn't bring them back up, thinking that Buffalo was going to, because they were talking a lot of not smack, but they were talking a lot about New England, like, we're ready for them, we want to go up against them. So I believe the Rex Ryan hype, and I left them in, and they just, as you see, delivered a big goose egg for me. So.
Now, when you lose by 1 point, you start scrutinizing your roster. Check this out. Sebastian Janikowski, who played Tampa Bay, went into overtime, was 1 of 3.
Right.
He missed the game winner in regulation, and I believe he missed one in overtime. Any one of those touchdowns would have handed Atwater a win.
Right. Right.
And when you see stuff like that.
And Janikowski is normally reliable like a train,
he's
man.
money.
And that day he just was not on it. So thank you, Sebastian Janikowski. Sorry, Johnny.
And so then let's look at the bench. Dak Prescott. You benched Dak Prescott. I got to ask you about that. Dak Prescott has been having an incredible season. He got off to a slow start early in the season, but he's been fairly consistent the last few weeks. Why would you bench Dak Prescott?
Well, because Russell Wilson has proven himself to be more of a consistent, capable quarterback, and he usually produces good numbers. You know, Russell Wilson's been hurt a little bit this year, and he's been somewhat inconsistent because the protection hasn't been there for him like it normally has. But starting with this week, actually, I was like, you know what? I got to go with the hot hand. I got to put Dak back up in the starting lineup. So I moved him back into my starting lineup for this upcoming week because I watched him Sunday night against Philadelphia, and he performed fantastic. I mean, they were throwing everything they could at him. They were bringing blitzes on him. They were confusing coverages on him, and he just stayed calm, took his lumps when he needed to, stayed calm, and delivered the ball right where it needed to be when it needed to be there. And with the help of Ezekiel Elliott to kind of keep the defense honest, then he had a spectacular night. And so I'm like, this kid is the real deal. You know, we're 8 games in now.
Yeah.
So, you know, you want to see if he's just kind of a flash in the pan or if he's somebody that looks like he's got all of the intangibles. And based upon what Philadelphia did Sunday night against him, he looks like a kid that's got all of the intangibles.
Well, one thing that's really benefiting him, all rookie quarterbacks wish they could have a running back like Ezekiel Elliott to take the pressure off him.
Right.
Because you got to stop Zeke, so they're going to load up the box, which allows Prescott to pass. If they try to play the pass, then they hand off to Zeke. So I think Prescott is really being served well by Ezekiel Elliott, who's a contender, I think, for Rookie of the Year.
Well, and it helps that Dallas has like one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. I mean, they've got guys that are veterans. They've played together as a unit for a number of years, so they're solid. And they believe in him as a quarterback because he keeps them out of trouble. So they're like a wall in front of him. So they give him that time to do what he needs to do. So, yeah, so Dak is he's in my starting lineup. We're going to roll with him for a few games to see how it goes.
So the records of both teams, Atwater's at 3-5, and you're at 4-4 at 500. Now we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back from this break, we're going to look ahead to Week 9 and make some predictions and look at some matchups and see if we can help you with your starting lineup in fantasy football. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, Lake Orion. Chief Jerry Narsh, Lake Orion Police. Just a quick conversation with you about a ballot issue coming up in November. You're going to see on the ballot a police millage proposal, and you're going to say, well, wasn't that already on there in August? Well, it kind of was. That's for 1 year. The one you're voting on in November is for the remainder of the years. And the reason it was separated is because the township is no longer collecting the millage. Now the village is. So really, the only thing that's changed is who you pay. The amount is exactly the same as was collected 4 years ago. The millage itself is not increasing. This is not a double dip. It's the same amount, just the difference is who you pay. So I encourage you to get out and vote, and we'll see you soon.
And welcome back to ONTV's Fantasy Football League. I'm Joe Johnson, joined by Kevin McCormick. We're going to look ahead to Week 9 matchups. As we always do, we look at the worst fantasy defenses. Overall, the worst fantasy defense are the Cleveland Browns. They're going to be taking on the Dallas Cowboys. We just talked about Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. Expect big things from them in Week 9. Holy moly. Overall, 31st, Atlanta, who's been playing well offensively, not so much defensively, are going to be taking on Jameson Winston and his squad from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ranked 30th, the Colts are going to be taking on Green Bay. Expect a big day from Aaron Rodgers and that group. Ranked 29, Carolina Panthers against the Rams. That should be an interesting game.
That is interesting because the Rams have kind of been sputtering on offense, and if Carolina's defense has the 29th weakest defense, then, yeah, the Rams may have a breakout week this week.
Yeah. 28th, Detroit is ranked 28th overall. They're going to be taking on the Vikings, who are looking to rebound after a Monday night game where they did not look good.
Right.
Ranked 27th, the 49ers are going to be taking on Drew Brees and the Saints. Expect a big game from him. Let's break it down by skill positions. Ranked 32nd versus quarterbacks are the Carolina Panthers, who happen to be playing the Rams. Case Keenum, he hasn't been playing exceptionally well. His best game of the season was against the Lions, which is no surprise there. They're coming off a bye, and people are starting to call for Jared Goff. They're saying that why are the Rams insisting on keeping Case Keenum under center when it's time to see what Jared Goff was capable of? What do you think?
I think the Rams have got a case of buyer's remorse with Jared Goff.
Really?
I do.
Not think he's impressing on the practice field?
I do. I think they have a case of buyer's remorse with Jared Goff. It's very suspect that, you know, for a while they didn't even have him dressing.
Yeah.
You know, he was just there in street clothes, which was kind of odd. Even if he's, you know, third on your depth chart as far as quarterbacks, you usually still have them dressed just in case you have that freakish thing where both quarterbacks get injured.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody in there, and they didn't have him dressed. And I know they're trying to bring him along slowly, and they're trying to do it the right way and not just throw him in there and rush him in there. But at the same time, I watched him a little bit in the preseason, and he looked like the game was moving too fast for him, even in preseason where you've got a lot of less than quality players trying to earn a roster spot.
Wow.
He looked like the game was moving too fast for him, and I think that they have a case of buyer's remorse right now. Now, they think, I'm sure, that they can fix it, you know, and just kind of work him along and work him hard in practice. We'll see. But yeah, I think that's a big part of why he's not
well, with the Rams facing the bottom-ranked Carolina Panthers, Case Keenum's going to have to put up some numbers this week, and if he doesn't, the Rams need to start thinking about making a change at quarterback.
Absolutely.
Ranked 31st, we talked about this a little bit, are the Detroit Lions. They're going to be traveling to Minnesota to take on Sam Bradford, who, wow, that Vikings team did not look good against the Bears. I thought it was going to be the other way around.
Right.
I thought that Vikings defense was going to shut down Bears and Cutler, and it was the opposite.
Well, you know, defense is Coach Zimmer's specialty. That's what he's kind of built his reputation on. So the fact that Jay Cutler, of all people, were able to torch them for 20 points and win the game and look good do it. I mean, they made Jay Cutler look like a hero, you know, and it was just kind of like, wow. So I expect that that Minnesota is going to come out with a vengeance to try to make up for, you know, the loss that they had and the way that they looked against Chicago. So Detroit might be in for something if they're not prepared. But Detroit just traded for a cornerback from Tampa Bay. So they're trying to shore up that secondary a little bit so that they don't get beat over the top so much. So it's going to be an interesting, everybody's making a little bit of adjustments and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see if those tweaks that each team makes will be enough to put them over the top. I think this is going to be an interesting game because it's almost, even though the Vikings have had more wins than Detroit by 1 or 2, I think it's going to be almost an even matchup.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'll tell you one thing. If I had Bradford on my lineup, I would definitely consider starting him against the Lions.
Right.
Ranked 30th, Atlanta. They're going to be traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Winston's been hot. 5 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Winston, another big game from Winston against the Falcons?
I think so. Famous Jameis. Jameis, he has a phrase where he likes to say, big time players make big time plays in big time games, and he tries hard to live up to that. And his 5 TDs over 2 weeks, I think, have spoken to that a little bit. With Atlanta's defense being as porous as it is and not as effective as it could be, I think he's looking to have a big game and to really connect and get some more touchdowns on the board.
Yeah, and Mike Evans is panning out to be a top 5 receiver in 2016. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're putting up some scores over there. Ranked 29th, Cleveland Browns. Some could argue this is one of the worst defenses in the NFL right now. They're going to be taking on the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about Dak Prescott. 9 touchdowns since week 3. In week 6, he threw 3 touchdowns against the Packers. I'm expecting this to be a multiple touchdown game against the Browns.
This very well could be a blowout of Dallas versus Cleveland. The thing about Cleveland is that they were ahead most of their game this past week, and then they ended up losing it in the end because their defense is not as strong as it needs to be, and their offense is not able to produce points to keep them in the game. So with Dak really hitting his stride, and I think Jerry Jones backing off a little bit about the possibility of bringing in Tony Romo when he's healthy or whatever. I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
I look for Dallas to have a big game against Cleveland. I look for Prescott to have a big game and try to get Dez Bryant back in the mix because Dez has been out injured early part of the season. He got a touchdown Sunday night against Philadelphia. He looked good doing it.
Yeah.
And so I look for them to try to get him more integrated back to the offense and get Dak used to throwing to him so that he can get back in the flow. So, yeah, I look for Dallas to have a big game.
Now, 2 of the worst fantasy defenses against quarterbacks are in the top 5 are both going up against each other. We talked about Winston against Atlanta. How about Atlanta against Tampa Bay? Matt Ryan, he's been on fire. 3 touchdowns versus Green Bay last week. He has multiple touchdowns in all games but 2 games. I picked him up on the waiver wire in our league, which shocks the heck out of me, and I benched Eli Manning, put Ryan in, and I'm expecting a multiple touchdown game against the
Ryan
Bucs.
is doing a good job of connecting with his receivers now, Julio Jones and Sanu.
Yeah.
You know, and so he's beginning to see those guys now and being able to get the ball to them. And Atlanta is getting better about actually finishing games. Before they would put up points, but they couldn't finish, mostly because of their defense. But now the offense is beginning to score in a way that they don't have to rely as much on the defense to actually stop the opponent. They just got to stay one step ahead of them.
Right.
So, and I think Matt Ryan and his receivers are able to do that.
Yeah. Let's move on to running backs. Ranked 32nd, dead last against the run, San Francisco. They're going to be taking on the Saints. Ingram was benched in Week 8 after fumbling, and I don't think he ever returned to the game. They brought in Hightower. Do you think Ingram's going to be back on the field in Week 9, or is Hightower going to steal time?
Ingram is an enigma to me as a running back, just in general. I don't think he's ever been known to be a fumbler. So to me, him being benched was more out of frustration, just fumbling kind of at an inopportune time.
Yeah, sending him a message.
And sending him a message. But Ingram is an enigma to me because he's not that dynamic of a running back, but he works hard and he puts in a lot of effort, and so he's managed to hang around the NFL for 4 or 5 years. But I just don't see him being the long-term running back solution that the Saints need to really be productive. We'll see what Hightower can do. I haven't seen a lot of him, but he's definitely, I think, going to get a couple more plays, mainly because of what Ingram did last week. So it's going to be interesting to see if we're starting to see a shift from Ingram into more Hightower.
Yeah. I'm always surprised to see Pittsburgh on a list like this. They're ranked 31st against the run. They're going to be traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Terrence West got the start, or he's coming off a bye, but in Week 7 against the Jets, again, a terrible defense, he did nothing.
Right.
I would keep West on my bench, even though they're facing Pittsburgh. I would keep him on my bench until he proves himself.
Terrence West had a really good week about 3 weeks ago because I ended up getting him off the waiver wire at one point, trying to find running backs to fill holes in my roster. But then he hasn't really done anything since. The thing about this game, Pittsburgh versus Baltimore, is that it's just going to be a defensive slugfest. It should be, because at the same time, they don't like each other. They actually don't like each other at all. So it's going to be physical. It's going to be hard. And if anybody is going to rise to the occasion, I think it's going to be one of these two defenses that's going to rise to the occasion. So it should be interesting.
So another two teams that are at the bottom five of against running backs. San Francisco is going to be taking on the Saints. Now I was looking at the depth chart for San Francisco 49ers. Carlos Hyde, who's coming off a bye, was inactive in Week 7, and they're not sure if he's going to be back in the lineup in Week 9. Mike Davis got the start in Week 7 and scored a TD. But right now, with that running back situation, even though they're playing the Saints, I'd be afraid of starting any 49ers. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I think the Saints are really trying to find their identity. The San Francisco is still very much dysfunctional, for lack of a better word. They haven't found the right combination of players on the field to be able to get that spark. And even if Carlos Hyde comes off and plays, that might help. But he's not going to be in game shape, so he's going to have limited reps because he hasn't been in for so long. So Mike Davis will probably end up getting a start, and if Carlos Hyde plays, I think it's going to be, you know, kind of sporadic duty as he gets himself back into shape. I like New Orleans in this one. I think they'll be able to come up with a win.
Yeah. San Diego ranked 29th, going to be taking on the Titans. Now, DeMarco Murray has been on fire. He's been hot. But I read that he had a toe injury in Week 8. So if you have DeMarco Murray, keep an eye on that situation. If he's good to go, start him, but look at his health on that.
When they determine if DeMarco Murray is playing or not, if he's out, then I would move Derrick Henry up and I'd start him.
All right. We're almost out of time. I just want to say something real quick while we're on the running back. Cleveland is taking on the Cowboys. We talked about that earlier. I just want to mention that Zeke Elliott is absolutely on fire. In 4 straight weeks, he's I think the only rookie to rush for 130-plus yards in 4 straight games. Only 96 yards in Week 8. Start Zeke this week. He's going to give you big numbers. Let's move to wide receivers, kind of move through them quickly with the remaining time that we have. Chicago's on the bye. They're ranked dead last. The Jets ranked 31st, going to be taking on Miami. Jarvis Landry, only 1 touchdown on the season. I'd be nervous about starting any Miami wide receivers in this game.
Miami has no offense other than Tannehill, so it's going to be a dreary game.
Yeah. This is going to be a fun game to watch. Oakland versus Broncos. Oakland's been putting up points. Broncos defense has been shutting teams down. But Oakland's ranked 30th against wide receivers, so look for Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders to have their usual big games. I expect touchdowns from those
Raider
guys.
week in Denver, so go Broncos. Trevor Simeon's going to get it to Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. Go Broncos.
There you go. Yeah, that's going to be a fun game to watch. Ranked 29th, Kansas City is going to be taking on the Jags. Allen Robinson has 3 touchdowns on the season. Allen Hurns has 2 touchdowns on the season. Not producing like they did last year, but I expect them to get into the end zone this week and expect a big game from their quarterback. Ranked 28th, Carolina against the Rams. We touched on this a bit. If you have Tavon Austin, Brian Quick, or Kenny Britt, put them in your starting lineup. I think they're going to produce against the Panthers. And then finally, and again, 2 terrible defenses, or not terrible defenses, but 2 lowly ranked defenses playing against each other, LA versus the Panthers. Start Kelvin Benjamin. He only had 2 catches in Week 8, but he had 73 yards on 2 catches. And Greg Olsen had a down week versus Arizona, but expect him to come back. He caught 181 yards in Week 5 against Tampa Bay. So, with that, hopefully that'll give you a little bit of help in Week 9. Looking forward to it. I'm going to be sitting there watching the Red Zone channel as I do every week. And Kevin, thanks for joining me this week.
Happy to be here.
Hope you had fun, and good luck next week. Thank you for watching ONTV's Fantasy Football League. We'll see you next time. Good night.